I didn't really grow up with soccer as the main sport. It was always about basketball and American football. And in 2014, the U.S. men's national team qualified for the World Cup. And America seemed to get on board. I was working as a limo driver then. I remember telling the dispatcher, do not give me a passenger during game time. I'm going to find me a nice restaurant in the city, sit down, and watch the game. You know, America was really excited about that run.
Absolutely.
What was it like seeing the energy in the country around that team and that run?
It was fantastic. The 2014 World Cup was a wonderful experience. It was in Brazil, and I actually went down to Brazil for the first 2 weeks of the tournament.
Wow.
So we got to experience that World Cup in its host country, which was a wonderful experience. I had a good friend from Brazil who sort of led our group down there. There were 7 of us. And we went to 6 games there. But we watched the first USA game in a big fan zone on the Copacabana beach, which was an incredible experience because we saw so many American travelers down there in Brazil. Right. They were one of the countries that had the most traveling fans to come to watch them, which that's a good measure of how popular the game is becoming in America. How many fans from America travel to a host country to support the team. Yeah. And there were lots and lots of Americans down in Brazil. Obviously, America did really well. The fantastic performance, all the way through, fantastic performances all the way through the tournament, culminating in that Belgium game when Tim Howard was brilliant in goal. But if I may take a bit of time and sort of add context to that question,
yes, in
terms of the game growing in America and America's performances in World Cups contributing to that. Mm-hmm. So America do have some sort of sporadically historic results. Okay. Throughout the history of the World Cup. The first World Cup was in 1930. In 1950, USA had an excellent tournament and a magnificent result. But the game obviously was still very much an amateur game in America and still in its infancy. 1990, the USA qualified for the World Cup, which was in Italia 90. Didn't do particularly well, didn't perform well in the group games. But then in 1994, America hosted the men's World Cup. Obviously, the history of the women's game in America is very different. I think I'd love to come on to that if we can later on. But in 1994, the USA hosted the men's World Cup. Part of the agreement that was struck with FIFA between the US Soccer Federation and FIFA was that if the hosting rights are awarded to the United States, then they must start a professional league. Okay. So the World Cup was in 1994. MLS started in '96 and has been growing ever since. Just had its 25th anniversary, the MLS. But that World Cup in 1994 was magnificent. Obviously, there are many things America as a nation are wonderful at. Yes. And putting on a show, collectively hosting a major tournament is one of them. Obviously, the stadiums are absolutely fantastic here. The infrastructure's there, the airports, the hotels, the transport systems. It's a wonderful place to visit. Obviously, the size was challenging for the players because you're crossing time zones to play games, and you're going to get.
While in America, you're playing on different coasts and different things.
Yeah, East Coast and West Coast. Yeah. So the opening game of World Cup '94 was played in the Detroit Silverdome. Mm-hmm. USA drew with Switzerland. The final was played in Los Angeles. Okay. So zigzagging. Orlando hosted, Dallas hosted, Chicago hosted. So the teams had to cross time zones, and they had to play in different climates. Obviously, the heat of it's June and July, so the heat of Orlando is different to the heat of Dallas, is different to the heat of Los Angeles. So it was challenging for the teams in that regard. But overall, a wonderful event. It's still, if I'm speaking correctly, it's still the most attended World Cup, even though at that point only 24 teams played in the World Cup. Currently, I think 32 teams play. For the next the next World Cup is in Qatar in 2 months, 32 teams. The 2026 World Cup is coming back to America as part of a tri-host with Mexico and Canada. First time 3 countries have hosted the tournament. And there'll be 48 teams then. Wow. But up to this point, even though there are more teams now and the World Cup is bigger now, that was the most attended because the stadium, 1994.
94, right.
Because the stadiums were so big and it was so popular. So that tells you that there was a passion for the game at that point, and there had been long before that.
How did the American team in 2014 compare to that 94 team?
Both did well, but the key difference is the environments that those players and the teams that those players are playing in away from the national team was vastly different. So in the 1994 team, there are a couple of players in the squad that had European experience playing for professional clubs. A lot of them had just played in the college system and in the amateur game in America. And then all of a sudden they're in the World Cup. And then, but the 2014 team and indeed the 2022 team that will take the field in 2 months in Qatar, they're all playing in professional clubs. Some of them in other countries throughout the world, many in Europe, and many back here in the MLS, in the domestic league. So they're all playing in professional environments. They're all playing with excellent players in very professional training environments, professional coaches, etc.
So the program is a little bit more further along. We now have Americans who are playing overseas, playing big-time soccer, not just gentlemen who played college and found themselves on the world's biggest stage.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, Dr. Sayers, what happened in 2018? You know, America, after 2014, we were excited. We thought we were a player in the global soccer game. We were on the upswing. And then 2018, the World Cup, America didn't qualify. The world had a soccer party, and America couldn't get past the velvet rope.
Yeah.
What was the reason for that?
For the first time since 86, I think, they qualified for every World Cup from 1990 onwards up until 2018. And obviously the qualifying campaign didn't go as planned, because obviously the plan was to qualify. The objective was to qualify. The results were undecided right up until the very last round of games in the qualifying campaign. And there were 3 teams that could still qualify in that last place. Of the games that those 3 teams were involved in, there were 27 possible permutations of results. Only one of those 27 permutations of results across 3 games would result in America not qualifying, and every single one of those results happened.
Wow!
It was they hadn't played particularly well in all the qualifying games. Some of them they had, some of them they hadn't, and when it came down to that last round of games, as I say, they were still favourites to go through. It was still unthinkable that they wouldn't qualify. But every single one of those results that had to happen for them not to qualify happened.
So it's kind of like bad luck?
I think there was a huge element of bad luck in it.
But Dr. Sayers, that bad luck is not going to happen to a nation like Brazil. They won't find themselves in that predicament. Is that fair?
I would say Brazil will be. I think Brazil are the only team that have qualified for every World Cup. But no, it does happen. Italy are widely regarded as one of the most successful teams in soccer history internationally. I think they won 4 World Cups, Italy. Brazil have won 5. Germany 4. Italy 3 or 4. I can't remember off the top of my head. But in that very small group of very successful football nations. And they haven't qualified for the last 2. They didn't qualify for this one in Qatar, and they didn't qualify for the last one in Russia. In between that, they won the European Championship. The European Championships is widely regarded as the second biggest soccer tournament in the world after the World Cup, because Europe has so many strong countries. Italy are European champions, which they won in 2021, and still didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2022. Soccer is played at such a high level across the globe now that those margins are very thin. It was disastrous for US soccer and the progress of the national team that they didn't qualify, but not an irreparable disaster. It's an opportunity to grow out of that. So I mean, so it's happened before. Italy, the Netherlands haven't qualified for World Cups in the past. Again, you'd widely regard them as being a major nation. France, the current holders, they won the World Cup in 2018 in Russia. some recent tournaments they haven't qualified for.
Because Dr. Say is someone who is just casually observing, it looked like a disaster. It looked like perhaps the national team may have dropped the ball at some point. But what you're explaining is that it happens.
It can happen, yeah. It was a bad situation, but financially as well. You know, the financial rewards of qualifying for a World Cup are very significant. The buzz that it generates,
Yes.
the sponsorship that it can generate, the shirt sales that it
Yes.
can generate. Obviously, there was an entire cycle where the US missed out on that, so it took a financial hit in that regard. And they would have been expected to qualify out of that qualifying group prior to the start. They didn't, and it was bad, but not irredeemable. And as we see, they've bounced back. They've had the men's national team have had some excellent results over the last few years, winning the CONCACAF Championship, which is a difficult tournament. Obviously, that's our region. CONCACAF is the US, is the geographic region soccer-wise that the US participates in. There's 41 countries in CONCACAF. USA, Mexico, Canada, and a lot of the island countries and Central American countries. So, and the CONCACAF tournament is like the European Championship, but for this region. So UEFA is the European region, CONCACAF is the North and Central American region. And they're champions of that, US now.